Okay, very good. So we are in the last lap then of this last chapter of Torah Devorah, and having gone through connecting to the spheros through a person's daily cycle, starting from when he goes to sleep, the actual experience of sleep, waking up after midnight, being engaged in Torah, connecting himself to the spiritual realm through Malchus in that way, and the different spheros above that, up to Tiferes, culminating in, well, rising further on into prayer, and then even further after davening the morning prayers by learning Torah, at least sometime during the day, preferably all day, and then directing his prayer in the morning towards Chesed, in the afternoon towards Din. He discusses the next stage in a person's daily, the next phase in a person's daily activities, which would be meals. Meals. That the meal should also be a spiritual experience, and the person's attitude and behavior and intentions during eating should also be aligned with the spheros. And that's what he starts off by saying here in this chapter, Uven ze lo ze, between this and that, meaning between Tfilat Shachris and Tfilas Mincha, kosher hashchina imo b'seudasoi. Another opportunity that he has to connect himself to the Shechina is through his meals. B'seudaso. How so? Shegoimel chesed imhani azois. That he bestows loving kindness and an active giving, charity, with that poor maiden, that poor woman. Who's that? The Shechina. The Shechina. And Malchus, which is dislocated, particularly now during the period of exile.
Why is she suddenly considered a poor woman when before it was like she's there as your second wife, she's the female representation of Hashem, and now all of a sudden he's referring to her as a poor woman?
Because she has, the Shechina has this dual aspect of, on the one hand, being, let's say, one of the female aspects with which a person connects himself, through which he achieves bracha, the one being his temporal wife, the other being his spiritual wife, it's true. On the other hand, during the period of exile, Malchus is in exile as well. So that all of the Shefa that generally comes down through the Spheros and out through Malchus becomes dislocated. And part of davening and praying and connecting the Spheros is in order to reestablish this Malchus, which is his potential spiritual mate, into her proper place, so that she should be rather than being like a banished princess, she's actually enthroned in the place of Malchus in order to become a queen. But his relationship to Malchus is simultaneously both aspects. It's on the one hand recognizing the importance of his relationship with the spiritual realm through Malchus, as one would provide for the needs of one's wife, but also recognizing that in many ways the Shechina itself, which is like his wife, is dislocated, and he has to care for and tend for her needs even more so. And doing so establishes her back into her place. So both themes operate simultaneously. And right now he's talking about between those two experiences of the morning and afternoon prayer, which is eating, infusing the act of eating, the experience of eating, as something spiritual. And he's first connecting it to the idea that the divine presence in the world, which is referred to by the term Shechina, you're probably familiar with that term, the divine presence of God in the world, is often, particularly nowadays where we view this as a period of exile, dislocated. The divine presence in the world is dislocated. It's not easy to see God. You have to work very hard at it. And God's presence in the world is not as palpably felt as in times of old. And this is because of the fact that the divine presence, like I said, went into exile as the Jews were also exiled. If the temple, the Holy of Holies, the temple, Jerusalem, the land of Israel, and the Jewish people are like the focal point of spirituality in the world, once the temple was destroyed and the Jewish people were exiled, so spirituality was diffused and dissipated into the world as well. And therefore the world is kind of lacking this this emanating of the divine presence. And part of serving Hashem, part of serving God, is doing things which are going to kind of reestablish God's more palpable presence in the world. And that's ultimately going to culminate in what? The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, right? The gaining of Jerusalem by Jewish people, the rebuilding of the temple, and then the restoration of God's presence in the temple, and then therefore the world as well. In order to counterbalance what went wrong, this period of, or this stage of rebuilding will take place. Part of what we do in our lives as Jews throughout our entire lives, and every day that our lives are comprised of, meaning on a daily basis, is about trying to promote that process, catalyze that return, right? To bring about and stimulate that, right, that dynamic. And that's what this book is talking about here as well, with everything that we do, including eating, for example. So that the point that the author is going to make here is that even through eating, which is generally a mundane experience, we put food into our body in order to fuel the physiological needs of the body so that we have energy to do the things in the world that we want to do. Yeah? Even though there's certainly that component to eating, Jewishly speaking, spiritually speaking, there's much more to eating than just that. Eating, drinking, whatever the case may be. And through the act of eating, one is actually providing for the restoration of the divine presence in the world. How so? It goes back to something we were saying earlier, that even the physical manifestation of mitzvot, the physical performance of mitzvot, is connected in the spiritual realm in ways where things that we do here, insofar as they're connected to things in the spiritual realm, act like levers. You put on tefillin here, it does something there. Right? You do bris milah here, it does something there. We spoke about it in great detail in the early part of the book. But those ideas are connected here as well, which is that if the divine presence is described as being dislocated, the presence of the divine, or let's say the divine presence is diluted, it's dissipated, it's weak, it's, as we're saying, compared to like this poor, forlorn, exiled princess who's wandering around, yeah, dislocated without the protection of the palace and all of this type of a thing. So the intentions that a person has when he's eating actually has an effect on providing for the sustenance of that poor, dislocated, exiled, right, forlorn woman who's traversing alone in the world. That's the Shekhinah, right? How so? As follows. When a person eats, like we said, the actual food gives sustenance to the physical body. But the food itself, in addition to having the quality of being fuel, which is combusted by the body and therefore gives the body energy to perform, there's also spiritual potential in the food as well, which gives sustenance to a person's soul. If a person's eating only for the purpose of sustaining the body, so the quality of eating is only going to be combusting the physical fuel of the food, and as a result, all the person's going to be is physical. Even if the food is kosher, and there's certainly an advantage to eating kosher food, spiritually speaking, but in terms of providing food for the soul, that he's not doing. By having the right intention when a person eats, that there's not only a release of physical fuel for his body, but there are actually sparks of holiness in this food, which are giving energy to his soul. Right? Without having that intention, he's actually limiting himself. Whereas if he does that as intention, he's releasing all types of energy which he can capitalize on. I'll give you an example, okay? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, according to Jewish tradition, was up on Sinai, receiving the Torah for 40 days. Was he eating there? No. Was he drinking there? No. Was he sleeping there? No. The Torah says no. 40 days with no food and no drink. So what was he subsisting on? Soul food. Yeah? But not by eating. Basically by being connected to God. Right? He was actually being sustained by godliness. The energy of the divine was being incorporated into Moshe and keeping him alive, similar to the way in which you might plug your MP3 player or your devices into a computer without taking its battery. Yeah, because the computer is downloaded. Its connection to the computer is keeping it charged. So Moshe's connection to God is keeping it charged. The same thing with people who are not on the level of Moses, maybe on a lower level, but they're eating spiritually. they are deriving and combusting energy from the food, which is not limited to the physical fuel of it. It's connected to the spiritual component as well. So that people who are spiritually eating can actually get by on a lot less fuel. It's much more economical. You can eat a lot less and still be able to function the same way or even better. And that's why we find, for example, right, the righteous eat very little. Like the Gemara says regarding Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, that in his righteousness, in the merit of his righteousness, bounty and blessing came into the world for everybody to share. Loads and loads of fruit and food and bread and all of the bounty in the physical world came about through his righteousness. But he himself subsisted on a very small quantity of food from Shabbos to Shabbos. He ate very little, nearly nothing during the week, and he ate something on Shabbos, and that was able to keep him going all week long. Yeah, why is that? Because he was connecting to the spiritual component of food, right? And that was a source of energy. Therefore, when a person is spiritual eating, he has in mind that he is eating not only to sustain his body, but also sustain his soul. Sustain his soul as well. And the same thing regarding the divine presence. Divine presence also subsists on the food that we provide it. What type of food do we provide it? Spiritual food. What's the source of that spiritual food? The Torah that we learn, or the mitzvahs that we perform, generate a type of spiritual energy, which is then used to sustain the spiritual realm. And in this way, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is in a way actually receiving from us the mitzvot that we do, the energy that's created from the mitzvot that we do, and the Torah learning that we do, in order to give it vitality, right? In order to sustain it. And therefore, this poor woman, who is lonely, forlorn, and wandering, lacking all of the dainties and the delicacies that she would find in the palace, the home of her father, the king, is sustained by us, by our giving her, right, these things. That is the energy of the Torah mitzvahs. So that our learning of Torah, the performance of the mitzvahs, is actually bringing about, generating energy into the world, which is then consumed, as it were, by the divine presence, which sustains her and actually goes a long way towards restoring her, the feminine, the divine presence, to her proper place. Yeah, that's the point here. So therefore he says on Ein Ches, towards the bottom, the last paragraph, Uven ze leze, meaning between this and that, meaning between the morning prayers that we discussed earlier and the afternoon prayers that we discussed earlier, kosher hashchina mo besudaso, a person should tie himself, meaning invite, bring home, create a haven for, through his meals, and shegomel chesed ima aniazos, and in this way he does a great service to this poor woman, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, which is dislocated in exile. As was said, for example, by Hillel Zaken. There's a note here, 9 Nun Gimel. It says, Gomel nafsho ish chesed. There's a verse which says, Gomel nafsho ish chesed. A person, well, really, ish chesed, meaning a good person, Gomel nafsho, he actually provides for his own soul. Zei Hillel Zaken. This is a reference to Hillel Zaken, one of the sages of the Talmud. Amru Talmidev. His student said to him, Rebbe, leichana tahoylech. Where are you going, Rabbi? Amar lehem, ligmol chesed, imhoden achsania, begobisa. I'm going to do an act of chesed, of loving kindness, with the guest in this home. Amulo, kol yoim, islach achsania. Said, Rabbi, every day you have a guest in the home? You're always going and saying that you're providing for the needs of your guests. He said to them, he says, what? And a person's soul is not like a guest in his body. So from here, the Zohar is actually making a reference to eating. You see from here, therefore, that eating is not something that we should do just to satisfy our physical needs, or the more so in order to indulge ourselves in the physical desire for food, but rather we should literally be thinking, I'm eating this food in order to sustain my soul. Why is it important to sustain my soul? Because it keeps me alive. Why is it important to stay alive? Yeah, because if you're not alive, You can't be an investment banker on Wall Street, right?
Can't study Torah.
There you go. Yeah, you can't be a spiritual banker. If you're not alive, you're not going to be able to be an investment banker, investing all of that spiritual money, which is the Torah and the mitzvos, into your spiritual bank account, your spiritual Wall Street. Yeah, the world to come. And therefore, right, this is the type of thing the person should have in mind. I'm not only eating because I need to keep my body alive. Of course, that's important. Yeah, you want to sustain the needs of your body. Yeah, but you're primarily eating for spiritual reasons. If you have the right intention in mind, you're eating in order to be able to be alive, in order to have energy, in order to do the will of God. So now that transforms your physical act of eating into spirituality. Then you become a human being. Then you become elevated. Then your eating becomes almost angelic. It becomes like the Shekhinah itself, which is consuming and deriving vitality from spirituality. If not, so then we're no different than a dog. What does a dog do when it's hungry? Eat. Right? And what are animals usually doing? Eating. Or looking to eat. Yeah? What does a cow do all day? Right? A cow just stuffs his face. Just stuffs his face all day long. Right? And animals, by and large, right, have their faces and their heads oriented and directed towards the earthliness, towards the earth. Human beings, right, are one of the few animals that have the head upright, above, the highest part of the body, right? So all of our thoughts, things that we see, things that we hear, things we smell, things that we taste, all of our faculties should be directed upwards, towards Hashem. Of course, we can look downward, right? We can even do handstands if we want, but that's not the point. That would be turning things upside down. We don't want to be like the cow, stuffing his face with food all day, chomping on Doritos, drinking down soda. Yeah, right? Because it tastes good, it's sweet, it makes me feel good, it gives me high, it gives me a lift. No, you should be eating properly when you have the right intention in mind. So then you're eating, generally speaking, you're going to be eating healthy foods in healthy quantities, not unhealthy foods in unhealthy quantities. But most of society nowadays is based not on serving God, but on serving ourselves. So we serve ourselves more and more and more and more. And what we're served are the things which make us addicted to serving ourselves. Right? So all the things that we eat and all the ingredients that go into it are, and all of the packaging and all of the promotion and all of the, what's it called? Advertising, right? Is all in order to sustain consumption. Sustain consumption. On. But it's all distracting a person from the real purpose. So a person eating spiritually, you find that you really can get by with a lot less, yeah, a lot longer way. Now, Yodei Tzadik, furthermore, it says here in the text, Yodei Tzadik nefesh behemto. Yodei Tzadik nefesh behemto. A tzaddik knows the needs of its animal. What are we referring to here? Zei tihiyeh kavanoso besudaso. This should be the intention of a person during his meal and his approach towards the experience of eating in general. Ligmol chesed lenefesh behema, in order to do a kindness with his animal soul. Ulekashra betzod hamazon, and to tie it into the mystery associated with the meal or with foods. So tzaddik yodea nefesh behemto means that a tzaddik, a righteous person, knows the needs of his animal. What's his animal? It's a reference to the animal soul. The lowest of the 5 levels of soul that we've discussed, that's the nefesh. And therefore a person is aware of the needs of his animal soul, and he'll therefore eat in order to provide for the needs of that soul. But the purpose is just to keep himself alive. Ultimately, however, the purpose is so that that nefesh is able to become like a candle to the level soul above it, which is ruach. And ruach will then sustain neshama chaya, and chaya and yechidah, so that through the act of eating, he's actually elevating his soul to the highest realm. What are you going to say?
I was going to show you here in the book. That's the last notes for chapter 10 on the very bottom and all that.
In a propitious time?
No, on the right side. The last two are talking about the animal soul.
Yes, his animal soul. And every Jew, righteous or wicked, there are 2 souls. As is written, I have made souls. Alluding to 2 souls. One soul originates in the klipa, in the sitracha, and is enclosed in the blood of a human being, giving life to the body. For the life of the flesh is the blood. This refers to the animal soul. That's from Chaim Vital. Very good. So this is a reference to the fact that what we're speaking about here is that when a person eats, that food is ingested, it is then digested. the energy is transmitted to the different parts of the body, including the blood. The blood sustains not only the physical body, but it also is the house for the nefesh, like it says in the Torah, nefesh hu adam, that the nefesh, the spiritual component of nefesh, is in the blood, and that nefesh itself is a seat for the levels of soul above it as well. So when a person, so that's the pshat here, that's the explanation of the first, with the saying here, which it says, yes, tzaddik yudea nefesh behemto, that tzaddik, he knows the needs of his animal nefesh, which is to eat, to be sustained through food, but he's using the experience of food to sustain his nefesh, not to remain on the level of behema, which is an animal, but rather to realize the elevated potential that he has as a human being. That nefesh will then generate and vitalize and maintain the higher levels of soul as well, ruach and neshama, corresponding to emotion and intellect. There's another note here, nun dalid. Yodea pirush lekashir. Oh, very good. Like it says, Adam knew his wife. What does it mean he knew her? He knew her in the biblical sense. Yeah? Meaning he was connected to her. He had intimacy with her. So that Yodea tzaddik nefesh behemto means that the tzaddik, he connects his physical component to his spiritual component, even through the act of eating with the proper intention. The chesed nikra mazon, and the reference in the verse to chesed is a suggestion of mazon. The zan, the word zan, which is like sustenance in the form of food, is the gematria of kel and havaya. Aleph lamed and the name of God, Yud, He, Vav, and He. Why? 57? Yes, 57. Interesting, okay? Zan. So it's Kel and Havaya. And both of these names, Kel and Havaya, are associated with Chesed. So Yodea Tzadik, Nefesh Behemto, Zoti Hekavonas B'Sudoso. And this should be the intentions that he has when he's eating. Ligmol Chesed LeNefesh Behema with a kosher B'Tzoda Mazon. Very nice. Yeah, we're not used to thinking of food in that way. Think of food in those terms, right? Think of eating in those terms. But these are some of the ideas that a person should have when he wants to eat Jewishly. It's not just to eat kosher, but it's to eat with the intention in mind that he's really doing this in order to be able to serve Hashem, and not himself. In which case, like I said, he's going to be eating healthy things in healthy measure, and he's not going to be indulging himself. Number one. And number two, you can have in mind that zan, which is the sustenance through food, corresponds to these names, Kel and Havaya, the names of God. So he's actually infusing his food with divine names. And it would be no wonder then when he's eating it, he's releasing energy from it, which is more than just the physical function of the food, but it's the release of the spiritual energy as well. It's kind of an amazing thing. Because like everything, on the one hand, it has a physical facade, but if you break something down into its microscopic parts, you get to the atoms. And you break up the atoms, you get to the nucleus and the protons and the neutrons and the electrons, right? And science tells us that in these basic building blocks of existence, in the atoms and the subatomic particles, there's actually more space than there is place, and there's more energy, right, than there is mass, right? So that really you should just have your hand pass right through the table, because there's really no place there, right? On the most simple level, there's more space than place, and there's more energy than mass. So that shouldn't happen. Right? You should just go right through it. But there's divine energy, which is within all of that subatomic material. When you tap into it, the results are explosive. Right? Atomic energy coming from space, from energy, and it's here, right there, everywhere. Yeah? Huge amounts of energy hidden within the secret dimensions of creation. That's the presence of the divine. So if you're eating only physically, you're connecting to the physical aspect of the food. But if you're eating spiritually, you're connecting to the divine sparks, the divine presence, which is in food as it is in everything. And when you release that, you're tapping into that energy, you're tapping into a tremendous source of hidden energy, right? Like those who tap into the atomic energy and release huge amounts of explosive energy. So if you're eating with spiritual purposes, you're actually tapping into the hidden divine aspect of food, which is hidden in every part of reality. And that would explain why, for example, people get a lot more mileage out of eating much less if they're doing it with the right intention. So on page Ein Tes, V'achar she'ola l'sha'as mincha nikshar begvura. After he's completed his meal, and he goes back to his daily prayers, and he has already finished his mincha prayer, which we discussed earlier. At this point, himtin le'erev, he waits until the evening, v'yarad hatiferes el malchus, harihu imoi b'techilos halayla. At that point, Tiferes descends down to connect to Malchus. What's this referring to? The fact that he was engaged in learning Torah throughout the day, certainly at the beginning of the day, and if he wasn't able to during the day, he is supposed to return to some type of learning in the afternoon. And this is to fulfill what it says in the Talmudic teaching, that a person should always be engaged in Torah at the times when day touches night. So between, let's say, the period before sunrise, and the period of sunset. Basically, what we're calling Ben Ishmashos. Ben Ishmashos is the period of twilight between what is Ben Ishmashos? Between the Shemesh, between the suns, the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun. What was that?
So the twilight zone.
The twilight zone. Yeah, that's what we're doing here. The twilight zone. Yeah. So the twilight zone is a potentially dangerous zone. Right, the twilight zone. So learning Torah during the twilight zone. What's that?
I said it's a pretty crappy TV show too.
Say it again.
Yeah. Bite your tongue, sir.
Yeah. So it's important when a person's entering the twilight zone to be engaged in Torah study. The Torah study will ensure a proper I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? A proper expedition through that twilight zone in order to get from one side to the other. And that's what we're referring here to as well. Going back to Torah study towards the end of the day, in order to be mechaber, that we say, midas yom b'layla v'midas layla b'yom. V'arihu imo b'tchilas halayla. And now he is going to be with the Torah then at the beginning of the night, because he's engaged he goes back to Torah study. If he was interrupted, he goes back to Torah study towards late afternoon, sunset, and the onset of night. V'kosher atzmoi bo, and he connects himself to the power of the Torah at that time as well. V'nichnas lebeis hakneses im chavana hiniskeres le'el. At that point, he goes into the synagogue in order to pray his evening prayers. V'kosher atzmo lamata tiferes bo lebeis melonoi, in order to connect himself in that Beit Knesset, and fixing his Torah study in the Beit Knesset has the result of bringing the Tiferet down back into Malchus, where Tiferet, we said, is the influence of Torah into the world, right? And the Beit Knesset is the Malchus. That's the place where the influence is received. People pray there. Their prayer goes into the spiritual realm. That prayer is answered and brings down the benefit that the person's praying for into the world. And the focal point for that, the synapse for that, is the synagogue. So learning Torah and praying at this time then brings Tiferes down into Malchus. And that's what he means here. Tiferes ba lebeis malono. Tiferes is brought down into its place. It comes to rest. The malon. Yeah. Yotza mi beis hakneses. At this point, after praying the evening prayer, he goes outside of the Beit Knesset, meaning he departs, he exits the Beit Knesset. Yiyached atzmoi mamish b'malchus levad. At this point, he will designate himself specifically with Malchus alone. Besod Kabbalas o Malchut Shemaim, How does he do so? How does he connect to this? How does he, again, kind of ascertain and ensure that the divine presence will be with him throughout the night, despite the fact that the night, where one doesn't see as well, it's a time when the sun is not introducing its productive energy into the world. It's a time of doubt and uncertainty because you can't see well. It's a time of improductivity because you can't do anything. How can you ascertain that and ensure that at this time there's going to be a productive, there's going to be a protective type of presence of God in one's life? Like we say, Lahagid b'boker hasdecha ve'emunas chabeleilos. We're going to tell God's praise in the day. Why? Because we see the presence of God, right, very clearly. Just like in the day, you see it very clearly. Emunas chabeleilos, but we're going to nevertheless espouse faith in you during the night, meaning during times when there's doubt and uncertainty. The faith and belief that we have in God will enable us to espouse our belief in Him even at those times. So that going into night is a time where the presence of God is less visible, it's less present. How are we going to ensure then that God is nevertheless with us at that time? He does it by doing what he says here, Besod Kabbalas al Shemayim. He does it by bringing upon himself the yoke of heaven. And this brings us back to full circle where we started. How so? Where the person starts his daily cycle at night by saying the Shema. Shema Yisrael. Hearken, hear, God, the Jewish people, take to heart the following declaration. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is our God, and that God is one. And that affirmation of faith, the declaration of the belief in God's kingship over the universe, that's called being Mekabel Ol Malchut Shemayim, accepting upon ourselves the yoke of the kingship of heaven. This brings Malchus into a person's life before going to sleep, encapsulating his soul as it ascends through sleep in the dream state, ascending into the spiritual realm in order to become rejuvenated at the pinnacle of sleep before getting up. This then connects the person, these teachings enable a person to connect a particular time of day with the influence of the particular sphera which reigns at that time. And in this way, a person is always in tune with the particular energy that is resonating into the world at that time. So that when a person lives his daily life according to the teachings that he's presented here, so he's becoming like a spiritual tuning fork. Ding, yeah? Where he is resonating with the influence of God in the world at that particular time. Sometimes that influence is more benevolent. Sometimes that influence is more strict. Sometimes that influence has more bounty. Sometimes that is more limited or restricted. Sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's sad. And it has many different aspects, primarily corresponding to the 10 spheres that we've been learning here. And when a person is connecting during the day, during these activities that he's doing, with the proper sphere that is associated with those activities, he's actually resonating with the forces that are in the world at that time. And therefore we mentioned, after saying the Shema, he goes to sleep because dinim are operative at that time. And the Kriyat Shema that he said, and the other protective verses that he has done, envelop his soul with this protective influence, which is going to help him elevate during the period of sleep. This is the main thing, though, that a person should be resonating, right, he should be in tune with the times. I think that's a good way of putting it, yeah? He should be in tune with the times. He's spiritually in tune with the influence that's operative in the world at that particular time. The teachings here that we've been going through are primarily located in the Zohar in Parshas Breshis. And the rest of the teachings that he's incorporated here in this chapter are basically eclectically chosen throughout the work of the Zohar. The Eitza Koleles, the Iskasher Ha'adam Tamid B'Kedusha, and this is a general way of advice, a pattern of living, which is going to keep a person constantly connected to holiness. V'lo yachsar itor v'ashchina me'al rosho. And if he lives his life according to this way in general, he goes through his daily rhythm in this way, then he's guaranteed that the crown of the divine presence will not depart from upon his head. And with this we conclude the book Tomer Devorah.